Alright, so we've all heard of the old adage, if you see a good move, stop and look for a better one. Well, today we're going to examine a practical example. We'll take a look at a real game situation where this came up, and we will see how it affected the game. So the following game comes from, played knight f3 on move 2. The following game comes from the 2015 Mid-American Open in St. Louis, Missouri. My opponent in this game was Tim Steiner, rated just over 2100 from Kansas City. And the opening started off as a Dutch defense, where we both castled kingside, and on move 7 my opponent played the move queen to e8. Now his idea is to go and break with e5, opening up his pieces and playing in the center. So I attempted to slow that down with d5, and the idea is to capture en passant. And here I calculated that if he played e5, which he did, I could trade, and here I would have two good options, the immediate knight d5 and also knight to d4, discovering an attack on the b7 pawn, while also threatening to take the bishop and have the two bishops. Well, after the move knight d4, which is the move I settled on, I was anticipating one of two choices, c6 or bishop c8. And it turns out bishop c8 is actually the better option. However, my opponent chose c6. Now, my initial plan when I played into this, starting with move 8 d5, was simply to trade the bishops, and then perhaps followed up with a move like queen b3, hitting b7 and guarding my pawn. And I thought here I would have, roughly equal position, but maybe a small advantage, thanks to the fact that I have the two bishops in a fairly open game, and my bishop bearing down on the long diagonal might prove to be quite strong. However, before I played the move knight takes e6, I paused and I looked at the position again, and I started to try to look for a better move. For instance, one thing I noticed was that c6 had the side effect of weakening the d6 pawn. For example, if I played bishop f4 immediately. Now this would only lead to at best a trade, since black of course would have the option of taking on c4, I could take here, and rook f7, perhaps even coming to the d-file. I wasn't sold that this was the right way to go. I also considered trading first, and then following it up with bishop f4, or perhaps even queen d3 to keep my own pawn covered, and then following it up with bishop f4. But as I started to look at all these ideas, I realized that the d6 pawn was in fact weak in a number of ways, and it is not currently guarded, and it can only currently be guarded by the black queen. So I looked harder into the position. If you see a good move, look for a better one. I felt knight takes e6, knight takes bishop was a good move, and following it up with one of these continuations would be pretty good. But I stopped and looked for a better one, and in fact, white in this position has an extremely powerful move. Can you spot it? It's knight c to b5. Now, what's the point? Well, of course, black can take the knight. And it may appear at first like white is actually giving up two pieces for a rook, and as we know, two pieces are stronger for a rook. However, the point is, after takes, the queen is no longer on e8, and the bishop on e6 is hanging. So in fact, white is simply winning an exchange here. Instead, my opponent realized that taking the knight would lose, and so instead of losing an exchange after knight c to b5, he played knight a6. Of course, the knight on b5 was also threatening to hop into c7 and create a fork, so he had to at least answer that threat. But remember, I was considering the weakness of the d6 pawn when I discovered this move, and in fact it turns out that black not only loses d6, which I took immediately, but also will lose the pawn on b7. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this example. Remember, if you see a good move, stop and try to find a stronger one. This has been 5 Minute Theory. Please remember to rate the video, leave a comment if you want to, and subscribe.